Hi everyone, we're team number 1 and we are going to explain the topics of photosynthesis, cellular respiration and fermentation. I am Sebastián Miramontes and the team is conformed by Víctor, Alexis, Esparza, David Torres, David Jesús Sánchez, Carlos Alberto Rojas and Juan Antonio Elizondo. Well, as an introduction to this presentation, in here we are going to explain and analyze the photosynthesis, explaining every aspect as the chloroplasts. Also, we are going to say about the types of reactions that could be like dependent or like independent reactions, and explain it every single detail and the characteristics that it has as the similitudes. Also, we include the information of cellular respiration. Here we include the formula, the process, and everything that surrounds it as the types that could be aerobic or anaerobic cellular respiration. And finally, we discuss everything about the fermentation and explain everything that surrounds this topic.
Photosynthesis. You can see that's the formula of photosynthesis. What is photosynthesis? It is the formation of chemical energy in the presence of sunlight. Well, what is sunlight? It is a set of waves that it is called a spectrum, and it is divided into ultraviolet rays, A, B, and C, visible range, and infrared range. Next, photosynthetic pigments. And the objective of these pigments are receive energy during the photosynthesis. Then, chloroplasts. What are the chloroplasts? These are in the leaves of the plants. And finally, chlorophyll is in the thylakoid, as well as the proteins that will carry out the chloroplast energy transductions.
Dependent reactions and independent light reactions. In light-dependent reactions, sunlight is transformed into chemical energy from two carrier molecules, which are ATP and ADPH. The reaction occurs in the membranes of the thylakoids, which are organized in photosystems 1 and 2. The independent light reaction, NADPH, ATP, and ADPH molecules are synthesized during light-dependent phase, and this second stage will use energy to reduce CO2. Carbon fixation. This stage begins and ends with RUBP. Synthesis of G3P. With the energy accumulated in the ATP and ADPH, the PGA will be transformed into G3P. RUPB generation. With ATP molecules, 10 to 12 G3P molecules are initially used in CO2 fixation. These are going to be regenerated and then used to process glucose. 4-carbon route or C4. This is a step that some plants include in the Calvin cycle in order to increase the processing of CO2.
My name is Víctor Alexis Esparza García, and I'm going to present the part of cellular respiration. First of all, anaerobic organisms use oxygen to carry out other functions. So this is cellular respiration is fundamental for these cells to make their tasks. The pathway responsible for breaking the different compounds are known as catabolic, and they are studied in 3 stages. The first of all, the macromolecules, such as that, triacylglycerosis, and proteins are digested into smaller molecules. The second one are the molecules obtained in the first stage are transformed into acetyl-CoA. And the third one, acetyl-CoA enters to the Krebs cycle, where in addition to CO2, the reducing valentines that are used in electron transport are generated. Anabolic pathways are those responsible for synthesizing from the simple molecules or other more complex, which sometimes functions such as energy. Here we have an image where we can see the process of the cellular respiration. The other one is like a comparison between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Now, Cellular respiration is a set of chemicals reactions by which certain organic compounds are degraded into oxidation molecules, which in the process generate energy that the cell can use for make their task. The steps of the cellular respiration when using glucose are: Step 1. The glycolytic pathway takes place in the cellular cytosol. Carbon dioxide was already produced as a part of oxidation of glucose molecule. Step 2. The acetyl CoA will be used in Krebs cycle, in which most of the reducing equivalents that will be used in electron transport chain are generated. And step 3. The consumption of oxygen and degrading generated during the transfer of electrons results in the synthesis of ATP, which is the energy that the cell uses to complete their tasks. And the equation is glucose plus oxygen produces carbon dioxide, water, and ATP, which is energy.
And I will talk about fermentation. The primary source of energy for microorganisms are carbohydrates, especially glucose, because it doesn't need a digestion process, and it only needs to be absorbed by the cells to start the metabolism. The route by which glucose is catabolized, which means that its breakdown, is glycolysis. If we have oxygen, then the process will be cellular respiration. However, there is no oxygen, and the final outcome will be of glycolysis will be the lactate. Here is the formula of fermentation when using glucose. It's 2-pyruvate plus 2-NADH, which stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide hydrate, and this transforms to 2-lactate plus 2-NAD to the plus. NAD to the plus is the same compound as NADH. The difference is that NAD to the plus transform electrons from food molecules into NADH, and NADH donates electrons to oxygen. The respiratory chain can't occupy lactate, but since there is no oxygen, then anaerobic glycolysis will be carried out. The two main types of fermentation are lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation. Lactic acid fermentation occurs when we do exercise, and this is because the energy demand of our muscles while exercising is too high, so it starts to generate lactate to get more ATP. And alcoholic fermentation is used in yeast cells and is what leads to the production of beer, wine, and bread. Fermentation is important because with the lactic acid fermentation, our body is able to produce ATP and energy when we require more, as when we do exercise. And alcoholic fermentation is important because it allows us to produce several drinks and food, such as the ones I already mentioned, which are bread, beer, and wine. And here are some images about the process of wine production, which is fermentation, and fermentation when using glucose.
So to summarize, we can say that photosynthesis is a process that plants need to make their own food and nutrients, and also produce oxygen by consuming water, sunlight, and carbon dioxide, and transforming it into glucose and oxygen. Also, we learned that cellular respiration is a process in which some organisms will breathe and get oxygen, and it consists of 3 steps. Finally, we can say that fermentation is a process that occurs in the natural environment it has two main processes, which are alcoholic and lactic types, with their own differences and similarities, and because they use different substances and components.